Hello, fellow Earthlings. In my previous video, I quickly touched on the events of Zimbabwe over the last few decades. Today, I'll be discussing those events more in depth so that other countries making a similar mistake today can learn from the history of Zimbabwe, their actions, and the policies of their brethren. In my previous video, what I was showing is how South Africans are torturing, killing, and running off the white farmers. So we're going to discuss Zimbabwe in depth so you can see what happens when you do that. And if they succeed, what their future will look like. Alright, first we're going to start with the Zimbabwe War of Independence. It's also known as the Rhodesian Bush War, which was a war that was waging between the years of 1964 to 1979. Then in 1980, Zimbabwe was granted its independence by the United Kingdom. Between the years of 1980 and 2000, that's a 20-year period, black Africans were attacking, torturing, killing, murdering the babies of and the children of the white farmers, and running off the remaining white farmers of Zimbabwe who were feeding the nation for many decades, establishing clean water drinking systems, and fostering a very large black population growth. They were implementing educational systems and building a great stable economy for everyone in Zimbabwe. Without the white farmers there would have been no large population. Alright, then in the early 2000s, there was a government-sanctioned land seizure program under the President Robert Mugabe. Now, directly after running off, torturing, and killing the babies of all the white farmers, the food output collapsed after the farmland seizure program. The people in Zimbabwe began starving. Zimbabwe's economy began collapsing. The black population began declining. Then starting around, I think it was 2010 or 2011, they began begging the white farmers to return. Now most of the white farmers are reluctant to return. They're concerned that the blacks in Zimbabwe will do the same thing to them again, which is a valid concern, because they did it to them the first time. And they will probably do it again. Now you can go and study all of this stuff yourself. And what I would recommend is that you share this video to discuss it with friends, family, and community members to help modern South Africans, Europeans, Americans, and any other people that have it in their heads to kill off white people and once again push them into a tiny pocket of land, which is what we see when recorded history begins. Now, I also invite you to debate me on this topic in video conference format. I'm only going to engage with people that are serious and courageous enough to face me on video conference. But I'm going to give you, since it's a free country that I live in, I'll give you the opportunity to write whatever nonsense that you want in the comments, and I'll leave it there. So everybody else who's nonsensical and hateful can agree with you and talk with you. Now, when recorded history begins, every race was enjoying most of the earth as their playground, while the white race was pushed into a tiny pocket in cold, barren lands. Now, it's no wonder that Caucasians had to migrate around and settle the earth once they got on their feet again, after being hated off of the earth, into a tiny little pocket of frozen, harsh lands. Study where white people begin at the very beginning of recorded history. They were nearly wiped out and residing in a tiny pocket of land, while everyone else was enjoying most of the world as their playground. We did the same thing to them thousands of years ago that we're attempting to do to them today. And we're repeating ourselves by ignoring history. And we all love flocking to the nations that the white man engineers and relatively safe and secure within their land. And then we hate them and push them out. That's why when recorded history begins, we see them only residing in a very tiny pocket of land, and the land was not very hospitable. It was cold and harsh. They seem to be able to create and engineer societies that are very appealing and attractive to the outsiders. And they're nice enough to let outsiders come in and prosper with them. And I feel that it's an attribute that no other race has. For instance, if you look at China all the way to Africa, China wants to keep China Chinese. And they don't really let outsiders prosper and flourish too much within their culture. And if we look at Africa, it's a similar type thing. They want Africa, black Africans just want Africa to be for black Africans. And they're trying to torture and kill the white man out of existence there. Perhaps the white race, for self-preservational reasons, should become more like every other race. But that would mean, instead of remaining on the high road, going back down to the low road to meet everyone else in their behaviors and their attitudes towards outsiders. Maybe that would be the wisest thing for them, is to keep everyone out of their societal structures and their bountiful harvests. Chinese people can make it on their own without white people. Africans, Asians, Hispanics, everybody can make it on their own without white people, but you're not going to have large population booms. There'll be much lower populations in every other race if they didn't adopt European societal structures, especially things like law and order, what many of you like to refer to as Karens. So we all have a serious choice to make now. Do we want to go back to tribal nomadic cultures in Africa by killing off and driving away the Caucasians? Or do we want to implement systems of European-assisted modern civilization? Do we want the return of Asian dynastic royalty cultures? Do we want the monarchies of the ancient world to make a return? Do we want the current European-assisted gigantic African populations to decrease, to allow a return to a nomadic tribal culture? These are questions Africans have to ask themselves. The current population of Africa is 1.2 billion black people. Are you prepared for that to decrease back to the 80,000 that it was before the Dutch farmers settled there? You have to make a choice. You can't have it both ways. It seems to me like you like having large population of black people that are now settling the entire earth thanks to those Dutch farmers. If I'm wrong about that and you'd like your populations to decrease very significantly, let me know. If you want to go back to tribal culture, nomadic lifestyles, tribal warfare, and a very small population, just say so. Now, not all, but most black people dislike every race but their own. They don't seem comfortable around any other race or any people that look different from them. And even in Africa, when a child is born too light-skinned or is albino, they torture those people and they'll kill them off in many of the tribes in Africa. So if you look different, even if you are of those people, you happen to be born albino, good luck to you. Now, you got to give credit where credit is due if you enjoy seeing a large population of black people on the earth. Now, if you look around where Africans are not assisted by Europeans in one form or another, it's mud huts, goat farming, everything dusty and dirty, tribal warfare, enslavement of each other, machete warfare, spear warfare. You wouldn't have these machine guns if it wasn't for Europeans. You'd be wielding spears and machetes still. You really want to be in flip-flops, farming goats, and living in a mud hut? If that's yes, then by all means, keep doing what you're doing. Torturing, killing the babies of all the white farmers and running them off. If you enjoy the mud hut, the flip-flops, and the machete warfare, and the goats, that's the choice you have to make. And nobody's going to argue with you if you want to go back to that. I'm sure Europeans will just up and leave and go somewhere else to farm. Now today, China is buying up large areas of land in many countries, but mostly Africa right now. And they're assisting Africans in developing their nations. China is basically your new colonizer and your new pale-skinned helper. And I'm going to guarantee you that in 100 years, and that's all it'll take is just 100 years, Africans will be complaining and killing Chinese people, claiming that they colonized them, when in reality, Africans themselves are currently selling their country away to China now, today, the same way they did with the Europeans centuries ago, and the same way that the so-called Native Americans sold much of their land, most of their land, to the Europeans who were settling here. Sold it fair and square, then they cry foul centuries later. And you can prove it to yourself with simple Google searches on, did Native Americans sell their land to Europeans? And it's right there. Africans did the same thing. And if there was such a small population of Africans on that entire continent, when the Dutch did come there, it's most likely there was nobody around all the places they landed. The Dutch probably just landed there, and what you have is small pockets of nomadic tribes all over the continent moving around. So the Dutch probably landed and didn't meet anybody for who knows how long. And then they might have met some representatives from Zulu Nation or some other tribe like that much after the fact. And then a conflict arose between the two cultures, much like what happened here with the so-called Native Americans who were actually Siberian migrants. What we call Native Americans here in the United States are actually from Siberia, and I proved it pretty well in my second video of this podcast, and you can go check that out if you want to see how I did that. So the same thing that the Native Americans did here, the Africans did, and now they cry foul centuries later, after prospering from selling off their lands, the same way the Africans are prospering today by selling off their lands to outside cultures and interests, such as China. So you can't cry foul later on when your people are prospering today from selling off and selling out your lands right under your children's feet. But perhaps you need the help in creating a larger population and getting out of nomadic tribal culture. It doesn't seem like you're doing it yourself. It seems like you always need outside help to come in to help you get to that kind of level of culture and civilization. Most of the world is moving towards implementing societal systems that the Europeans engineered. China too. Look at Chinese cities. They look exactly like the cities in the United States, or more similar than the cities of their old dynasties. They look like modern European type cultures. And their systems of law and order have shifted from being those dynastic empires to a more European style of law and order. India is also moving in that direction. Now, even though I think that having a tribal culture that lives more in accordance with nature and tortures animals less on a large scale, the way we torture animals for food on a large scale is kind of sickening to me. But if any culture today was to revert back to a tribal culture that lives more in accordance with the natural systems of the earth and keeps a very low population, they're going to be sitting ducks for any culture that doesn't want to go back to that. For instance, if the whole of the United States and Africa went back to tribal culture, living more naturally with the earth and more in tune and in harmony with the earth's ecosystems and the whole animal kingdom, we'll be sitting ducks. Both of these continents will be sitting ducks for a rising China, Russia, India, Middle East, and so forth. Because not everybody's going to just all of a sudden agree to reduce their populations drastically, not by killing people off, but just naturally. If you go back to tribal culture, your population will just naturally decrease over time. You don't have to kill anybody off. So even though I would like to live more in accordance and harmony with the earth and the animal kingdom, I'm no fool. I know we can't go back in time, and I'm not so naive to think that we can just wipe every hard drive, destroy all industrialized cultures, and go back to tribal life. That's just not going to happen unless all the most powerful people in the world will that to be. If the most powerful people in the world will it to be to where we live more naturally with lower populations, then that will happen, and they'll have to wipe out and destroy every library, every book, every hard drive, every piece of technology, and every industry will have to be leveled to dust in order for that to happen, which could have happened many times in human history as we reset ourselves and reevaluate ourselves. And I believe that's why our written history is so short. It's only a few thousand years old, because I think there was a reset back in a time long forgotten. And I think it's happened more than once with humans on the earth. And that's why when recorded history begins, we see the Caucasian, the white man, is just in a little tiny pocket of land in harsh, cold lands. And everyone else was enjoying all of these massive continents and a tribal nomadic lifestyle on those. So you can probably tell by my sentiment and my words that I'm not real keen on industrialization and human technologies as we have them implemented today. I believe we can do technology a little bit differently to where we're not so hurtful to each other and we're not so crazy and suicidal, because we'll try things without even having a good study of how it will affect us. We'll just try things and we poison ourselves with chemicals, and we also poison ourselves with frequency and vibrations and electricity. All of these things are affecting our biology and our spirit, and many in ways that we can't even see or comprehend yet. Now, that all being said, it is very possible that our push for technology and our industrialization has a greater purpose down the line that we can't see yet. And it's also possible that when we're able to study Mars a little bit better and dig a little bit deeper under the sands of time on Mars, I believe we're going to find evidence of ourselves living there long time ago. It's also possible on Venus and Mercury as well. Even though those planets are inhospitable to us today, it's very possible that they were habitable by humans in a different time, because we seem to be kind of like a planet eater type species where we consume. Maybe we're cosmic nomads. And these are just ideas I'm throwing out there. I don't fully believe any of this, but I like to ponder these things once in a while, where we're a cosmic nomad, where we just consume and eat up a planet and then move to a different one that might support us. Or we can industrialize and make technologies well enough to alter a planet to be hospitable to us, to be habitable by us. If it's not exactly tuned the way we need it, maybe we can fine tune it a little bit to where we can reside there. It's very possible with humans, because we're seeing ourselves grow technologically at such an alarming rate and a fascinating and beautiful rate that I believe it is possible for us to do almost anything in regards to science and technology. I think we're in our infancy of industrialization, science, and technology. But once again, these are things that I just like to ponder, and I have no evidence of that, but I would put money on us finding ourselves or evidence of ourselves living on Mars once we're able to dig into the Mars surface more than just a few inches, because all we can dig into the Mars surface right now is just a couple of inches with the rover, I think. The rovers are the only things on Mars that can really dig into the surface and analyze things. But just imagine if we were to dig, or be able to dig, 200 feet down. What are we going to find? I would put money that we are finding not alien civilization there, but our own. All right, I'll talk to you guys soon.